Hi writers, this video is meant to introduce you to how to construct a thesis draft and write an outline for the synthesis paper. In this class, this is the third paper of the semester and the last large paper. So before we begin, just a quick reminder about synthesis. The goal of synthesis is to integrate multiple details from multiple sources to create a new, more complex thought. So remember my analogy, a synthesis paper is kind of like a book club where you invite a bunch of sources in and everybody discusses the book. The goal is not to prove that you were right all along. The goal instead is to hear from many different perspectives that enrich your own perspective on the book. In this case, you're going to pull in multiple sources that share a common thread or theme related to education. You get to decide what that common thread or theme is, and you advance your own position. But that position has become more complex or stronger because of the perspectives that the sources provide. So, moving from topic to thesis, I recommend these steps. The first thing that you want to do is read and evaluate the sources. So the goal here is to read what they say about the issue in order to determine what you say on the issue. Their perspectives and ideas should influence your own perspective and ideas. Again, the goal is not to search for sources that completely agree with you, or even to search for sources that disagree with you to use as a counterclaim. The goal is to read sources that are talking about some issue, and then your perspective is changed or strengthened because of the different perspectives that you've read. So as you're reading, you want to start to notice common threads, main ideas, places where sources overlap in their main ideas, their subpoints, the type of evidence they're using. As you read through those sources, you want to ask yourself, what do all of these sources together illuminate about this topic? This ongoing conversation that all these sources are talking about. You may find that the sources reveal there's some issue going on, or there's something we need to be doing differently. The sources may, when taken all together, reveal a problem. The sources may, when taken all together, remind us of an important value. They may suggest a particular effect, or they may be theorizing a particular cause. The sources altogether may help you make a critique or an argument. They may suggest a particular solution to an issue that a lot of people are talking about. Or they may lead you to an implication, something that is implied by taking all of these sources together. Once you've determined what do these sources illuminate about this topic, you want to draft a thesis, and that thesis will establish your position. In this case, it may be an argument, it may be an insight, based on this new, more complex understanding of the topic that you have after reading some of these sources. Remember, very importantly, the sources that you choose for this paper must come from the source list. You shouldn't use any outside sources. Instead, you want to try to synthesize the sources that are provided to you rather than searching for the information that you're looking for to support what you already want to say. A thesis statement or a thesis sentence, as a reminder, is made of two component parts. First, it should be clear what your essay is about, the topic. And then it offers your insight or your assertion or argument or claim about that topic. So that should always be clear in each thesis. As a reminder as well, a thesis is generally one sentence and usually takes place or is placed at the end of your introduction. So once we have a topic, we want to move from topic to angle to thesis. So it might look something like this. I've noticed several of these sources I'm reading are focusing specifically on adult college students, or maybe just have information that can be applied to what I want to talk about regarding adult college students. So that's going to be my topic. Notice it's much more specific than just education. It's much more specific than just college. So your topic should already be becoming more specific than the general prompt topic of college or education. From there, I want to think about an angle. What type of focus regarding adult college students do I want to focus on? Well, I want to talk about how the experiences of adult college students are often really different than those of the traditional straight from high school or young adult college students. So that would be my angle. A thesis draft then is going to make a claim about my topic that includes my angle. Might sound something like this. Adult college students have different experiences than typical younger college students. It's just a little more fleshed out and a little more complex. Now, this is still a very basic thesis draft, so we will talk about how we can make it a little more complex, but this is a draft. So for this assignment, you are writing a thesis draft. You can always work on making it more complex, and it's very normal that you start with a draft and you continue to revise it as you continue to work on your paper. Keeping in mind, a synthesis thesis should do these three things. It should always present a clear position, so a clear topic, a clear angle, and then a position representing that angle. It should always be specific and unified. So based around one clear, specific main claim or idea. And in synthesis especially, our goal is to go beyond the obvious to reveal a deeper understanding and a fresh perspective. Again, reading those sources should enrich your perspective and make it deeper, fresher, and sometimes different than it was coming into before reading those sources. We want to think about what I call a Goldilocks thesis, a thesis that is just right. So a thesis that is too broad might be something like this: dogs make good pets. Well, for what reasons, right? It's pretty broad, it's pretty vague, it's not specific. This one, however, is too specific. Dogs make better pets than cats because they can be trained to fetch. So this is one very specific reason, and it would be hard to write an entire essay, even a short essay, just about the merits of being able to fetch. So in this case, it's a little too narrow to allow a well-developed thesis and paper. This one has too many main ideas. It's a list of 3 main ideas, which may be how you were taught to write a thesis, but in more academic, complex writing, this really just becomes a paper that's a list of 3 main reasons instead of a unified overall 1 main idea. Here's one that's closer to just right. The protective, loyal companionship dogs provide makes them more suitable pets for families than cats. So hopefully you can see here, this is more specific, has a more clear reasoning, but it is centered around one unified main idea. I'm going to focus only on their protective, loyal companionship. That does still allow me to have several main points. There are several ways I could talk about protectivity and loyalty and companionship, even within that thesis. Here are some templates that might help you arrange a synthesis thesis. You don't have to use these, but they're a great place to start as you're drafting. If you want to make a qualification, in other words, make a claim while still acknowledging some validity to people who might disagree, it could sound like this: while this claim certainly has some merit, here is my argument or my position. If you want to take a stand and offer supporting points, it could look like this: your position, and then followed by a because clause or a so that clause. That includes your overall reasoning. If you want to argue that we need to consider something or that there's an issue that we need to be paying more attention to, it might sound like this. Or like this. Here are some examples of what thesis statements might look like. These are all from previous students. They are all drafts as well, so keep in mind they may not be necessarily perfect, maybe grammatically or in some other ways, but these are all suitable drafts for the thesis statements. It's a great place to pause and take a look at these. If you choose to use these thesis statements as models, please make sure you're not following them exactly and just sort of substituting in your own words, but they can help you see some different ideas of how a thesis might sound for this paper. The next part of this presentation is going to lead you to the completion of the outline. So now that we have that thesis, how do we actually outline our main points? Extra credit opportunity. I want to make sure to reward those of you who are using these video lessons to help you complete the assignments and make sure that you're following the guidelines. So if you have watched up to this point, you have the opportunity to earn 5 extra credit points. To do so, please do this. In your exercise number 7 at the very bottom, please insert a picture of a baby animal. To do this, you can go up to the top and do Insert Image, and then you can choose an image from the web, and you can just use the search bar on the right to search a little baby animal picture and insert it into the bottom. You can make it small so it doesn't take up a huge amount of space. If you add that to exercise number 7, I'll add 5 extra credit points to your score on exercise 7, which could give you a little bit of a boost. And thank you so much for watching the provided video lesson so that you are following the guidelines for the assignment. When we think about organizing a synthesis essay, it does take a good deal of thoughtfulness when considering how to plan out a synthesis essay. It's not something that I can just tell you how to do it, because we're all writing about different topics and you need to do what works for your essay and the point that you want to make. However, a synthesis essay is generally best arranged point by point. So this is in contrast to how a lot of students may think they need to organize this essay, source by source. Source by source would be saying, here's my main idea, here's one source and what they say about it. The next paragraph, here's the next source and what they say about it. The next paragraph, here's the third source and what they say about it. That doesn't actually allow meaningful synthesis to occur. So instead, you want to arrange your essay point by point. Each body paragraph making a point, making a subpoint related to your thesis, and then pulling in the authors that are discussing that point. So that some paragraphs in your essay, at least one as a bare minimum, have more than one source interacting within that paragraph. And that's going to allow actually meaningful practice in those synthesis points. So your outline might look something like this. Of course, you're going to have an introduction. Your first body paragraph will have a topic sentence that makes a point. And then you're going to pull in as evidence one or more authors that discuss that point or provide evidence in relation to that point. In the next paragraph, you're going to make a different point as your topic sentence, a sub-point that helps you demonstrate or prove the point you want to make, and then pull in one or more sources that discuss it, and so on. You may also have a different perspective or sometimes a counterclaim that you want to pull in. And you'll pull in sources and evidence after your topic sentence to prove that. And then, of course, we will conclude with a conclusion. So we are moving point by point. Of course, that leads us to 2 questions. What type of points, and how do I actually organize those points? So in a synthesis essay, your body paragraphs might do any of these things. They might develop a premise or a value, like the idea that education is important. They might develop a factor, a contributing factor, or a cause, like one main reason this is happening is blank. They might determine or prove there's some type of outcome or effect, like one main effect of this problem is blank. They might develop an implication or talk about the significance of something. This matters to these type of people because blank. Or the implications of this are less of a focus on blank. They might develop a supporting point or reason. One main reason why we should is blank. Or they could develop a counter argument or a differing perspective. Some people might disagree, and those people might say blank. So the examples I gave here are all what topic sentences might sound that are doing each of these different types of things. Then you pull in sources that help you discuss and develop those ideas. We also want to consider then the order that we put those things in. So one of the main principles for arranging an essay is not a list. It's not just a list of reasons. Instead, you need to think about how to arrange each of your body paragraphs so that they're building and leading to something. Generally, we can think of the essay as building toward its most complex idea or its most sophisticated idea. So I would really recommend you start with your most simple ideas, the things you need to establish first, and then develop the argument in a more sophisticated way. So once you establish your paper's purpose and your goal, you want to think about key main ideas. Each of those key main ideas that support your specific stance is going to have its own body paragraph. And then you're going to incorporate supporting details underneath in your outline each of those main things. In a synthesis paper, remember supporting details from multiple perspectives and multiple perspectives in at least one or more of your paragraphs. This is a reminder from our previous outline assignment what this outline should look like. So for each of your body paragraphs on the assignment, you want an outline that looks something like this. For each body paragraph, you're going to have either a topic sentence or a phrase that makes it clear what point you're making in this paragraph. You will include sources. So each body paragraph should include the sources you're pulling into that body paragraph. You need to plan ahead for that. In this case, Basic Misunderstanding is a quote from Gary Gutting. So I've included the quote I want to include in that paragraph. And then my subpoints underneath. Subpoint number 2 with subpoints underneath. So we want this level of detail. Again, it's an outline, not a paragraph. So what I'm looking for is to see the structure of your paper as an outline before you begin to write it. So it shouldn't include paragraphing, it shouldn't include free writing already. We are looking for an outline. So looking at exercise number 7, here is where you're going to start to think about your topic and theme. There are some examples over here on the left. Then you're going to narrow it to an insider angle. Again, examples on the left. And then write a tentative thesis. Please do remember to go back to the video lesson to look at the thesis templates that can help you construct that thesis and the thesis examples. Parts 2 and 3 down here. Part 2 asks you to plan what sources you're going to incorporate. So they need to be a minimum of 3 sources that relate to your thesis and your topic that you plan to include in the paper. Over here on the right, just some notes. I'm not looking for anything specific here, just some notes about maybe evidence that the source includes or points the source includes that you want to consider including in your own paper because they relate to what you want to talk about. Part 3, the outline. Now on the outline, we haven't yet talked about introductions and conclusions for this paper. You are welcome to leave those blank. You may already have an idea because we have talked about intros and conclusions in general, so you can go ahead and sketch out if you want to. It's okay if they're blank for now. But here in each paragraph, you're going to include an outline of that paragraph, not the paragraph written out itself. So again, the outline for each paragraph should look like something like this, not a written paragraph. And of course, the extra credit opportunity that was mentioned in the video lesson. Don't forget to include that. You can put it right down here, insert, image, and then search the web for the image you want. Again, just to reward those of you who are watching the video lessons to make sure you're doing the assignments correctly. Please let me know via email if you have any questions, and hopefully this is helpful to you in planning your essay before you start the drafting process. Bye!